So the first thing I just wanted to say is thank you to Catherine and JSN for giving Ed, Marianne, and I this opportunity to talk a little bit about a project that has been just dear to us for much of the past 2 years, and with any luck, maybe the next few. Thanks to you all as well for joining this call, for your interest in the history of Jesuit slaveholding in America, and how we can bring that story to our students. To start, I wanted to answer the question that's at the very top of our curriculum, which I guess is Monique's question. Who are Isaac Hawkins and Nace Butler? So the image that you're seeing on your screen right now is an 1838 census of 272 enslaved people sold by the Jesuits in Maryland to help bail out Georgetown University from a financial crisis. And on this list, I'll highlight them in red, are Isaac Hawkins and Nace Butler, heads of families who were sold down to Louisiana to help keep afloat the flagship of Jesuit education in the United States. And our curriculum tries to tell their story and tries to tell the story of so many other men and women whose lives intersected with the reality of Jesuit slaveholding. As of yesterday, the JSN and the Descendants Truth and Reconciliation Foundation have officially published our 5-day curriculum. So originally, this slide was just going to be a link that I had put together of a bunch of resources that we had used, but I'm super happy to update it with the whole thing. And I saw that Catherine sent the link around this morning. So please, 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 in the course of the next couple of days, at your leisure, take a look at it, share it with people in your building who you think might be interested in this story, or who might be in a position to share it with your students. Ed, Marianne, and I would take your word of mouth campaign as just a huge, huge favor. So please, please, please don't be shy. So I'm going to speak to you a little bit about the how of it, and then I'm going to hand it off to Ed Donlin for the much more important why conversation. But to start, this is a 5-day unit, but we have some flexibility built into the thing. If all you have are 2 or 3 days to learn about and explore this history with your students, I think we've got enough pieces in the curriculum for you to do something productive with it. So these 5 pieces sort of work together, but also can be separated apart based on your needs. The curriculum explicitly centers and deliberately centers the experience of the descendant community. So day 1 is a deep dive exploration of the Descendants Foundation work. And then day 5 includes a great video that Loyola Productions put together featuring testimonials from a variety of descendant voices. So there's sort of a boomerang structure to the thing of starting with the descendants and ending with them, going through the history in between. It was important to us as we were writing this thing that this not just be a history lesson, but that we do our best to connect these stories from the past with the ongoing work of racial justice in our world today, especially stories of resistance to discrimination and racism. So we include stories from enslaved people and their ways of resisting in their time, but also try to carry that through with stories from the 18th all the way through the 21st century. Obviously, there's tons of valuable information in the plan, but this being Jesuit education, we also wanted to be really deliberate and attentive to the affective dimension of this work, in particular because this is a weighty topic. This is a heavy subject. So through things like prayer and spiritual conversation and discussion and peer sharing, our hope is that this curriculum helps our students not just access the information, but also have a place to sort of put it in their hearts, right? Have a place where this stuff can land for them and maybe shape the way they think about their own education and the society and the world that they live in. From a pedagogical perspective, we tried to be really diverse. So in terms of our methods and sources, we have primary source material, we have secondary source material. For the students, we want them to interact with text, with video, with music, with websites. We want them to read, we want them to annotate, we want them to write, we want them to do creative writing, we want them to discuss and to share with one another. So at its best, this is not a teacher walking the students through this story. At its best, this is the teacher and the students sort of discovering and uncovering this information for themselves through a variety of different kinds of activities. And then, excuse me, lastly, I just wanted to assure you that we didn't pull any punches in the telling of this story. The story of slavery in America is a tragedy, and the society's participation in that system is no less tragic. Ed Donlin has a line where he says, there's no such thing as a good slaveholder or slave master. So we try to tell this story without fear or favor, even when that implicates members of the society who participated in this project. That said, the existence and the organization of the descendant community for us sort of means that the story is only a tragedy if we stop the conversation now. Our great hope for this curriculum and its adoption across the network is that by sharing this story with our students, they also can become part of this ongoing process of reconciliation between the society and the descendant community. And as long as we lean into that conversation, the story's not over, and there's still an opportunity for God's grace and for hope to sort of emerge even in the midst of a lot of pain and suffering. So Ed, Marianne, and I are not going anywhere, and glad to have Catherine, glad to have you aboard as well for the long haul. We want to keep this conversation going, so I just posted our contact information here in case any of you want to reach out to talk through really anything related to the work that you want to do with this curriculum in your classroom or in your school. Please, please, please don't be shy. Please, please, please reach out. It's been a learning curve, I think, even for Ed and Ed, who have certain expertise in this field. I think it's been a learning curve for all of us. I know for me, there's just been this whole process of discovery. And so at any point in the process, if you want another voice to sort of bounce some ideas off of, I'm sure all of us would raise our hands and volunteer for that. I have to jet for class. You might hear a bell ring here in a couple of minutes, but I'm going to hand you off now to Ed Donlin, a real expert. So my work on this project started with a visit to Ed's classroom at my alma mater at Gonzaga College High School in Washington, D.C. That was back in September of 2023. And I still remember vividly to this day sitting in the back of Ed's classroom, just muttering Jesus under my breath at every minute, because at every minute there was a new discovery, there was a new revelation. That was sort of my introduction to this story. And I think what you'll find in Ed's telling of it, and his story has a primary place in the curriculum itself, is that his story is one that demonstrates quite clearly that the story of Jesuit education in the United States simply cannot be told without the story of Jesuit slaveholding. Ed Donlin will tell that story better than anybody else. I'm excited for you all to have that experience. And if you feel like you need to mutter Jesus under your breath at some of his revelations, as long as you're muted, I think it will be okay. So I'm going to end there, and Ed, I'm going to hand it off to you.
Hey, thank you, Cappy. I appreciate that, and thank you to everybody else who's here. And this is a real honor to be here, and really an extraordinary moment. Yesterday, to see the link to this finally be live after so much time and effort was put into this was really a wonderful, wonderful thing to see. And before I begin, I just want to say that I come from a place where I believe that this history is a gift to us. It's a gift to every Jesuit high school in this country if they choose to grapple with it. We're really good at our schools with talking about how great we are, and we've got a lot to celebrate. But sometimes we aren't so good talking about the challenging things that we have to face. And our students are demanding that we tell them the truth about the history of the Jesuits in America, and here at Gonzaga, the truth about the beginning of our school. The first slide you see is to Gabriel for weeding in the garden at time of recreation. And I'm going to walk you through the story of Gabriel Dorsey today and tell you his story. And I want to start with just his name. I think it's important that his name is Gabriel. And we know it's his name because he said his name. And at some point, you're going to see where he does. He claims that name for himself. And I wonder if his mother named him Gabriel because of the angel Gabriel. I wonder if Gabriel is an angel to us, a messenger to us, telling us that we have to confront this history and look deeply into our own selves. And so how did this story begin for me? Like so many of us, it began by reading an article in the New York Times written by Rachel Swarns in April of 2016. And I'll never forget the day I read that article. Here I am, a U.S. history teacher at Gonzaga High School, and I'm reading for the first time that the Jesuits were one of the largest slave owners, not just in Maryland, but in the United States. I was in the Jesuit Volunteer Corps in 1980, and we did a lot of work on social justice. Nobody talked about this. It was a revelation to me, and it led me to write an email to a professor at Georgetown who was interviewed extensively in the article. And his name is Adam Rothman. He's an extraordinary historian, extraordinary human being. And I invited him to come to Gonzaga to tell this story. And he agreed to come. And that November 16, he came to school and spoke to a couple of hundred students, faculty, administrators. And at the end of it, one of my students asked a question that I truly believe was the most consequential student any student's ever asked at Gonzaga. And he asked Professor Rothman, are you aware of any connections between Gonzaga and slavery? And Professor Rothman said, you know what? I don't know. But if you want to find out, you need to come to the archives at Georgetown University and start looking. And so that summer, a group of students, a group of extraordinary students, volunteered. This wasn't part of a class. This wasn't for extra credit. They volunteered over 3 summers to spend countless hours, as you see in these photographs, looking through 19th century accounting ledgers to find out if there was any connection between the Washington Seminary, which was Gonzaga's founding name, and slave labor, and to try to find out did enslaved people work at the Washington Seminary. And the biggest hurdle we had to cross was getting permission to get in there. They had never let high school students work in those archives. And once they agreed to work, the people that worked in the library were blown away by the focus of these young men, by their desire to find the truth. And so these are some of the ledgers we accessed. I mean, we became experts in accounting practices from 19th century, I can tell you that much. And here's the document that it all started with for us, just like Cappy talked about. And on that first day, we asked the archivist if she would bring out the document with the names of the 272 people. And they brought it out. And this document was laminated. And I remember one of my students said to the archivist, why is this laminated? I thought we were going to see real documents with our hands. And she said to him, this document is so meaningful to the descendants of the people the Jesuits enslaved, that when they come to find their family members, that so many of them began to weep over this document that the archivist knew they had to protect it by laminating it. That was such an important moment for us. It was a moment that told us that what we were embarking on was a human story. It wasn't some academic exercise, and that the lives of human beings were in the balance. And so let's talk about the story of Gonzaga. Gonzaga opens up in 1821 on F Street between 9th and 10th, literally right around the corner from Ford's Theater. And it opens up as the Washington Seminary. And so we began to educate ourselves into the extent of Jesuit slaveholding. And on this map that you see here, it shows the Jesuit slave-run plantations, White Marsh, St. Thomas, Newtown, St. Inigo's, in Bohemian Manor, way up in Cecil County, Maryland. And on the right, so many of these. We could have picked 100 of these. We just picked one from the late 1700s showing the buying and selling of human beings. It was everywhere. It wasn't hard to find. And so one of the things we began to hear from our peers after we started telling people that the Jesuits did in fact hold enslaved people was that things such as, well, at least they were good slave owners. They took care of them. They made sure they went to church. And so we had read about a report written by a Jesuit priest from Dublin named Peter Kenny. And he was sent over to basically tour the plantations and to write a list of recommendations. And these recommendations gutted us, as they have gutted every one of my students who I've shared them with. But it's important that we teach the full history. As Cappy said, this is hard history. But I can tell you before I get into how my students have grappled with it, they can handle it. They want to know the truth. So let me read you just several recommendations from this report. Let their ration be fixed. In some places, they have only had 1 pound and a quarter of meat. Often, this has not been sound. Whether they are to be allowed to rear poultry and hogs. Whether they are to have half of Saturday to themselves. that pregnant women should not be whipped, that this chastisement, oh, I lost it here. Let me, gotta go back one more. That this chastisement should not be inflicted on any female in the house where the priest lives. Sometimes they have been tied up in the priest's own parlor, which is very indecorous. Horror upon horrors we're reading about. And here is this is the book that is going to tell the story about Gonzaga's founding. Gonzaga's founding is deeply connected to slaveholding. This little book that says 1821 to 1827, that has tattered pages in it and a worn out leather cover, it provided us with the answers we were asking about. And we see right away that there is money coming in. Can I lower this thing here, this little bar here? Oh, that's awesome. So you're looking at a guy who has a hard time keeping his checkbook balance. I don't know much about numbers, but we had to figure out this 19th century accounting practices. And fortunately, it's pretty straightforward. You have money coming in and money going out. And there was only two sources of money coming in that we found in our research about the founding of the school. There was some tuition money coming in, but the vast majority of money came directly from these plantations, such as the above receipts arrived from the following source: from St. Inigo's, $900. And literally on the same page, the above sum was expended as follows: for establishing and support of Washington Seminary, by cash paid in part for finishing and furnishing Seminary of Washington, $599. We were convinced within the first week that funds from these Jesuit plantations paid for our school. Now, we see more of these here. My students actually found this document in an online database in Rome. And they immediately called this the smoking gun. And let me read you directly from this. Statement of finances, credits from Bohemia, 1,500, from Newtown, 700, from St. Inigo, 1,000. These are three of the plantations. Clearly, profits from those farms are being deposited into the school's account. And it says here, to support of Washington Seminary, $2,000. But this one here is striking. Has been expended since 22 July 1820 in payment of debt on purchase of ground on which Washington Seminary is built, $1,066.81. The Washington Seminary, Gonzaga College High School, literally owes its entire existence from the ground up. Before a brick was put in the ground, every penny of our DNA goes back to the stolen labor of enslaved people. We also found a letter written by Father Daubuisson that says, this document offers the testimony of Father Daubuisson, president of Georgetown, for 7 months during 1829, who noted that, quote, concerning the house in Washington that is called the seminary, this house was built with mission funds. We were quite confident at that point that we'd answer that first question. There were financial connections between the Washington Seminary and our school. We also found all other sorts of connections, including this one that I want to point out: St. Inigo's farm to the general fund provisions furnished to the Washington Seminary. And this is just an absolutely staggering amount of food that is being delivered to the school for the use of our students. 333 weight of bacon, 133 more pounds of bacon, 3 dozen chickens, 107 pounds of beef. And my students have frequently asked about this document in light of Father Kenny's report. And my students understand that there wasn't a lack of food on those plantations. What was happening was that food was being given to the students at the Washington Seminary. This was our most important question, and the one that would take us to some of the darkest corners of American history. Did enslaved people work at the Washington Seminary? And the answer is yes. As of today, we can identify 5 enslaved people that worked at the school: Isaiah, Gabriel, Sophie, Mary, and Ned. I'm going to focus today on Gabriel's story. And here is the very first time we find his name: to Gabriel for weeding in the garden in time of recreation, April 30th, 1822. He was given a tiny amount of money for weeding in the garden, 6 1/4 cents, it looks like to us. And my students asked me, how much is that? Was that a lot of money, Mr. Donnellan? Well, the answer is the line above. The line above says, to 1 ball of cotton, 6 1/4 cents. So the tip that Gabriel received was equal to 1 ball of cotton. The next time, there we go. Gabriel appears 3 other times in our accounting ledgers. Again, all simple 1-line notations where he's being given small amounts of money. Tipping was a common practice for enslaved people. It was in some ways a way to get them to believe falsely that if they just worked hard, perhaps there would be a way to earn their freedom. And later in 1822, to Gabriel, October 1824 to Gabriel, 0.20 cents. And finally, in 1825, the last time he is at our school, he's given 0.12 cents, where he's identified now as Gabe. We lose track of Gabe at the Washington Seminary, but the school closes. The Washington Seminary closes in 1827. It's not going to open up again till 1848. But we find Gabriel now at Georgetown College, and this document helps us understand a lot about him. It says, Mrs. Margaret Fenwick by Hillary's wages from May 1st, 1825. Hillary arrived at the college about the end of April 1825 to the 13th of October 1827, when Gabe, a black boy from the Seminary of Washington, took Hillary's place at $1 off a month. This document tells us that Gabriel's enslaver is a wealthy widow living in Georgetown named Margaret Fenwick. She has several sons, one of them who at the time was a student at Georgetown. Gabriel is being leased to Georgetown so that her son can receive a discount on his college education. Mrs. Fenwick, shortly after that, offers Gabe an opportunity for self-emancipation. And I want to read you directly from this document. Negro Gabe, in the beginning of March 1828, he obtained leave to buy himself free on the following terms. He has to pay $8 every month for his hire, and has besides to lay every month something aside until he collects the sum of $400, which he has to pay for his freedom. So Gabe literally walked around Georgetown, knocking on doors, begging people to hire him. And he found somebody, because we found 3 cash deposits from Gabe in that accounting book, $8 each, in February, in March, in April. Gabriel actually believed he was on his way to freedom. Well, that hope for freedom is going to end dramatically in May of 1829 when Margaret Fenwick dies. And we found this document that says to cash from James F. Purvis for Gabe, $450. James Franklin Purvis is an agent for the largest domestic slave trading company in America at the time, called Franklin and Armfield. Gabriel was sold in June. So this is something that my students grapple with. He was part of the Fenwick family from at least 1822. And 30 days after she died, he was sold. Why was he sold by the Jesuits? Because her oldest son was a Jesuit priest and was the executor of her estate. And let me just clarify this. When I say we, it's not always my students. My students wrote to historians, and some of these documents were found with the help of historians, which is something that I'll always be grateful for. Every time we wrote to a historian, they wrote back to these kids, which is just remarkable. This document is actually called a statement of good character. In 1829, Louisiana passed a law saying that before any enslaved people can be brought into Louisiana to be sold, they had to carry with them a document stating their good character. And so this is what we have in front of us now. We used to think it was a bill of sale. It's not. It's a statement of character. I'll read you the bottom part. Anthony McElroy and Joshua Millard, and put a little asterisk next to Mr. Millard's name there, whose names are subscribed to the foregoing certificate and solemnly declared on oath of the holy evangels, that they have known the said slave named Gabriel in the foregoing certificate mentioned for several years, and that he has not, within their knowledge, been guilty or convicted of any crimes, but that he has a good moral character and is not in the habit of running away. Gabriel, 21 years of age now. We're learning more about him. 5 feet 3 inches tall. We can picture him now. And this document was found by an historian named Jenny Williams. Jenny Williams is probably the most expert historian in the country on the domestic slave trade. She's amassed a database of 62,000 names of people who were trafficked by ship from the upper South to the lower South. And she found Gabriel's name on the manifest for a ship called the United States that would leave Alexandria in early November 1829. And I want to read to you what she came to school and spent 2 days with us this fall. And I'd like to read to you what she read to my students. Because in making this document, she explained that this also had to accompany the enslaved person on that ship, the statement of good character and a manifest of the ship. Everybody on that ship, and there was 240 people on this particular ship, had to walk into a customs official's office. And you see on this document that their height is listed, 5 feet 5, their age, their race. But she explains that the customs officials don't know the names of the people. And so that's the one question that they're asked that they have control over. And so she says this, and yet standing before a customs official on November 6, 1829, knowing he was about to be cast away from everyone and everything he had ever known, Gabriel spoke his name fully. He spoke his name formally. He spoke his name as Gabriel Dorsey. My students located 2 newspapers that announced the date that boat departed Alexandria and the date it arrived in New Orleans. I think it's important to include those to show just how much they wanted to find out about Gabriel. Now, this is an interesting addition to our research. A guy used to write for the New York Times, wrote a book about a slave trader in Baltimore named Hope Slater, and he had called me up a couple times to talk about Gonzaga's research. And he called me one day and he said, I think I know where the guy who purchased Gabriel is buried. He said, I think he's in the Greenmount Cemetery. I live in Baltimore and I drive by the Greenmount Cemetery all the time. And so one October Saturday, I walked through this cemetery literally from corner to corner. And I found this guy's tomb there. And I took the picture, not because I'm proud of it, but I think because it shows the contrast with Gabriel. He's got this fancy tomb in the Greenmount Cemetery where all his family members are buried, and we have no record of where Gabriel is buried. But the other important thing we found was his obituary. And I think it's important for my students to read his obituary, particularly for what it doesn't include. Death of a former banker. Mr. James F. Purvis, formerly a well-known Baltimore banker, died on Friday evening last at his residence in Freedom District, Carroll County, Maryland, age 72 years. Mr. Purvis was of a Tennessee family and was a resident of Baltimore for many years. About 1840, he engaged in the banking business in Baltimore, and upon its suspension in 1868, removed to a farm in Carroll County where he resided until his death. Now, there is no mention of his life as a slave trader. There's no mention of the fortune that he accumulated as a result of selling human beings. That part of his history has just been erased. And in many ways, it's the story of the Jesuits' history of slavery that's been erased, that we're now finding the courage to confront and grapple with. The other document on this page shows that when Gabriel arrived in New Orleans, he was now valued at $700. Now, I asked you to keep an eye on Mr. Millard's name. This document here is the last time Gabriel's name appears in the historical record, and it's from 1833, and it's in a Georgetown College archive accounting ledger. And let me read you what it is. It says here, by commission on sale of Gabe for $450 at 5%, $22.50. $22.50 was put into the account of Edward Millard, a college student at Georgetown, because his dad agreed to sign that statement of good character for Gabriel. Gabriel's life was paying for the education of this student long after we knew what happened to Gabriel. Now, I'm going to jump. Let me just put this out here. Jetty Williams has found a document from 1876 with the name Gabe Dorsey on it. I'm just going to put it out there. She's 99% sure it's our Gabriel, which would be an extraordinary addition to our research and make his life as extraordinary. It was even more extraordinary. It's from a Freedmen's Bureau accounting ledger, and it shows a Gabe Dorsey being paid $14 for his labor between May and November 1867 on a plantation in Tensas Parish, Louisiana. Jenny isn't quite ready to have it put out there as an official thing yet, but I just wanted to share that with you, that there's a strong possibility that we may find out what happened to Gabriel, that he survived slavery, that he survived the Civil War. He truly was a messenger to us. So I'm going to jump through the slides of the other enslaved people, just for the purpose of time here. But we have documents about Ned. We have documents about the two enslaved women at the school, Sophie and Mary. But I want to finish in the last 7 or 8 minutes talking about really kind of the purpose of this curriculum. And that's, how do you bring this research to your students? And I want to talk a little bit about how it's played out in my classroom. And I want to begin with a quote from one of the historians that helped us. This is Joshua Rothman, who wrote the history of the Franklin and Armfield Company. Slaveholders and slave traders would have us reduce enslaved people like Gabriel to numbers on a page. It is our job. It's our job as educators to see past their focus on the money involved and remember the people behind the prices. That's what drives me in my teaching, to humanize this history, to take those names off of accounting book pages, to take away the fact that their lives were commodified, nothing but dollars and cents, and to humanize those lives. And poetry plays a big part in this in my class. And it's some of the work I'm most proud of my students. And I just want to share one of these poems with you. This is after students learn the history, they're asked to reflect on it. They need to use their imagination, and they do. And they take this to a whole nother level. Joseph Wette, an amazing young man, played on our football team, went to the University of Oklahoma, was an extraordinary artist and poet. It's called By Day. I dug through dirt. You smelled the flowers. I wiped soiled tables. You sat and laughed. I was tipped. You were entitled and gifted. I prayed. You prayed. The garden grew. I could not. In this other poem, written by another alum, Winston Leslie, is a play on our alma mater. And I got to tell you, at our sporting events, when they sing the alma mater, the roof comes off. It's really important to them. But this student took that alma mater and gave new meaning to it. This is called Gabriel's alma mater. Pain-filled love echoes ever proudly across your purple and white lined scars, your own stigmata. My brother Gabe wears shackles, not Vans. My brother Gabe packs brick, not tobacco. My brother Gabe sings sorrow, his own alma mater. Hail Gabriel, march on. Now, I taught a student named Caleb Williams, and I'll never forget the day he came up to me after learning this history. And he said, Mr. D, I'm going on a recruiting trip to LSU. Are there any historical sites I can visit? And I immediately thought of Maringouin, Louisiana, because what I haven't said clearly is that the 272 people that were sold in 1838 were sold to two plantations outside of Baton Rouge. Many of those enslaved people were sold to a plantation in Maringouin. And I asked Caleb, would you like to visit Maringouin? It's not far from Baton Rouge. And would you like to meet with a descendant and tour the community? And he said, I would like to do that. And so I arranged with a woman named Jessie Tilson to meet with Caleb and his mom and dad. And during this recruiting trip, he spent 2 hours walking through Maringouin. He went to the cemetery there. He saw the tombstones of several of the people whose names are on that census document. And when he came back to school, he brought with me that jar of soil he's holding in his hand because he knew he had walked on holy ground. Now, this is another thing we've begun doing the last 3 years. And it's a way to take a deep dive into Gabriel's life. What we do is we go to the location of where Gabriel was held at the Franklin and Armfield Jail on Duke Street in Alexandria. When Gabriel was sold by the Jesuits, he was taken to Duke Street and held there for 3 months. And it's a museum now, and it's an amazing museum. And we tour the museum. We learn about the history of the building. We learn about how many enslaved people were there. And we imagine that this is the place where Gabriel was held. And we're accompanied by descendants. Julie Ennis has been a good friend of ours. Melly Colombe Short, whose picture is there, has been a good friend of this school and spent countless visits to the school talking to the students about this history. And what we do after we tour the museum is we gather in front, and every student holds in their name one of the 240 people who are aboard that ship, the United States. And we prepare with a quiet meditation to walk from that former Duke Street slave pen to the foot of Duke Street, which is the waterfront, where that ship, the United States, would have been waiting. And so we walked literally the same steps that Gabriel and those enslaved people walked. And to see 100 high school boys walking silently, prayerfully, down a public street is something that only reinforces me the importance and value of teaching this history. And when they get to the bottom of the street, as you see, we recite every name. And after that, we reply in unison. We remember, we remember, we remember. And then we hear from more student poets who read poems literally on the site where Gabriel was put on that ship to a life that he would never know. We're starting to see some artwork produced by our students to grapple with this history. We need the arts to confront this history. And this is just a simple sketch, a silhouette of what this student, Kai Jones, when he reflected on Gabriel. And on one side, you have the money that he's been sold for, $450. But then coming out of his shoulder, Gabriel, 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 Gonzaga, Gonzaga, Gonzaga. And I'm going to finish with one final poem. This is an amazing photograph. We are literally standing at the docks at the Potomac River, where so many enslaved people's lives were ripped apart and stolen from them. This is a young man named James Skelton, one of the quietest students I've ever taught. He wrote a poem that I had goosebumps when I read this poem. And it's given him great confidence. He read this at a presentation I gave. I invited him to come with me. And so I want to finish by sharing this. Gabriel in the garden. In the quiet soil of F Street, a boy bends low, brown hands, bare feet, tending roots that would grow into a school that would never celebrate his name. He does not write the Latin verbs. He does not take communion. He is a number to them. 6 1/4 cents for his dignity, same as a ball of cotton. They made money from the soil he worked, soil he'd never owned. His life was sold to religious men, but that religion would not free him. A child serving children. How could they not see the irony? The Christ was being divided. the follower versus his word. The garden forgets his footsteps, but now we know. The bricks, the books, the prayers all whisper his name back into being. Thank you.
So you probably all need more time than I'm going to give you to really just process and think. So hold on to that. Thank you, Ed. Thank you, Ed students. And I want to give both Father Tim Kosicki and Monique a chance if they would like to share anything. Right before that, I keep sharing the link to this. Sorry, I'm having trouble like focusing and processing and talking at the same time. It doesn't matter how many times I hear this story. It can't not affect you. On page 20 of the curriculum, there is an amazing video called "And the Truth Will Set You Free." And I would suggest that as you're looking that curriculum over, that maybe that video would be something that you might want to start with, just to orient and start. I will also be sharing a link to the presentation piece of this presentation, so you can share that. So Monique, Monique is, maybe you all know her, hopefully. She's the president and CEO of the Descendants Truth and Reconciliation Foundation. And there aren't enough words to say how important she is and the work she does to this curriculum and to the work being done. So.
Yeah, thanks, Catherine. As Catherine stated, I'm Monique Trustclair Maddox. I am joined on the call today with one of my other cousins, Kat Albrandt. Kat lives in San Diego, and she's also on the board of our foundation as a descendant. So she's one of my newly found cousins through this history. I grew up in Maringouin, Louisiana, less than a mile from the cemetery where we saw Caleb Williams there in that cemetery, where that news article that came out in 2016, that was the first time I learned this history. I am a cradle Catholic and still practicing as a cradle Catholic today, and believe in our church and believe in the mission that we have today, a shared mission between the Jesuits and descendants to reconcile with this history. Every day I come to work hoping to heal a people and give hope to people who feel hopeless today. When I looked at that manifest back from the 1838 sale, it hit home to me pretty closely. So when Ed talks about this being people and real people and real history, it is real. It's real for our family, because that manifest listed my mother's great grandfather on it as 3 years old, as one of her descendants, one of her ancestors, and then another of her great great grandparents. Nace Butler also listed on that manifest. So all four of my grandparents descend from this history, and it could not be as close to me as it is to anyone else. So I'm honored that the Jesuits and the JSN network have decided to begin to share and put more effort toward being more open and embracing the history and sharing it with people, because I can tell you, young people have a distrust for a lot of leadership today. And if we try to hide this from them, they will resent that we are hiding this history from them. So I encourage each of you to garner a support group to be able to walk with you and walk with your students through this journey. So thank you for having me today, and I look forward to speaking at the JSN Global Perspectives next month in Seattle.
Thank you. Thank you. Tim, would you like
Hi,
to?
Catherine. Good evening, and thank you all for having us. I was president of the Jesuit conference in April 2016 when Rachel Sworn's article hit the New York Times. And on that day, I was very far from DC. I was attending a meeting of provincials in Antananarivo, Madagascar. They were all the provincials of Africa and Madagascar. And I can tell you that article reached them all the way there. And really, from around the world, people wondered, how will the Jesuits respond? In April of 2017, Tuesday after Easter, I was asked to apologize to Monique and her family at a service of liturgy, contrition, and hope in Gaston Hall at Georgetown University. And I remember in that apology, I said very clearly that we resisted moving on, but embraced moving forward with hope. And that's what I see today, a courage to embrace moving forward with hope. Ed Donnellan, who presented so generously, we overlapped while I was at Gonzaga College High School, was there that day. And to see him recognize that this is bigger than the 272, this is bigger than Georgetown University. And that video, which Catherine referenced, ends with a very powerful passage from the Gospel of John, John chapter 8, verse 31. You shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. Let us free our students so they can fully embrace the truth of our history. Thank you.